Welcome back to another episode of Inside TYPO3, and this one is a special episode because we are in Dusseldorf for T3CON 24, and in this episode, Tom and I are going to walk you through the conference, whether you were here with us in person or wanting to catch up on everything that happened. We'll break it down day by day. We have some interviews peppered in there so you can get a feel for the speakers and the content and take you along the ride with us. So Tom, welcome to Dusseldorf from Wales.
Hello there, nice to be back. Yeah, we've got some really good interviews to share with everyone today. We'll start off with a recap from day one, followed by our first interviewee. Then we'll follow that up with a recap of day two, another interview, and then a recap for day three. And we'll also talk about the awards gala, which took place on the very last day of the event as well. So without further ado, let's get into our day one recap. Day one was our public sector day, which featured a range of talks and discussions aimed purely at those who work within government and higher education. After the opening ceremony, which was delivered by Frank Schmidt, the first talk of the day was given by our very own Daniel Fau, Louisa Fassbender and Frank Nagler. In their talk, TYPO3 for the public sector and education, the dynamic trio provided an update on how TYPO3 is being used in this market. It's well worth pointing out that TYPO3 is being used on more than 35% of German government websites. And during the talk, we learned about the different ways government departments leverage TYPO3. I think for most people, including me, the big highlight for day one was the Government Site Builder, or GSB. Based on TYPO3, the GSB is a service that is available to all government departments and is integral to the Federal Information Technology Centre's long-term goal to standardise all federal websites so that they use a single CMS solution. Silke Spielkamp, the project lead for GSB 11, and Nikolai Jaklitsch, who is head of e-government basic services, took part in a panel discussion where they talked about the GSB project in detail and also took questions from attendees. After the panel discussion, I sat down with Nikolai to find out more about the project, and as a relative outsider, I had plenty of questions for him.
So this afternoon I'm joined by Nikolai Jaklitsch, who is the Head of Directorate at the ITZ Bund, otherwise known as the Federal Information Technology Centre here in Germany. Nikolai, thank you very much for joining me today. I'm really grateful for your time. And I suppose to get right to it, as part of my role, I spent quite a bit of time this year talking about the Government Site Builder and the work you've been doing on behalf of the ITZ Bund. And it certainly sparked quite a lot of interest outside of Germany in terms of what you're doing. So from the perspective of an outsider, or for our listeners who aren't aware, could you give us an overview of the Government Site Builder project, please?
Of course I can do. Thank you very much for having the opportunity to be here. It's really a pleasure for me. For us, the Government Site Builder project has let's say, 2 or 3 main goals. The first goal we have is standardization. It's important to know in Germany we have a federal state organization, and within the federal governmental body we have, let me guess, 18 ministries, and each ministry is trying to do its own thing regarding IT and all that stuff. And a couple of years ago the Ministry of the Interior started an initiative to standardize that stuff, to reduce costs and to align the requirements and to align the development and continuous integration processes. That's the main thing we do. Our main struggle is to convince people from this path of standardization.
And I guess the main reason for this change was driven by cost or reducing costs?
Yeah, it was on one hand driven by reducing cost, on the other hand driven by reducing complexity, because prior of using TYPO3 we had about 180 websites we had to manage at the ITZ Bund, which have all been individually developed. And when you have to do when you have to set up a major release, you're struggling quite a lot regarding the technical processes. So on one hand it was the reducing of cost, and the other hand was facilitating CI and CD pipelines, which is pretty important for us. We want to do automatization as much as we can.
I see. And I guess there was a tender process where you looked at multiple solutions. Briefly, could you tell us some of the reasons why you opted for TYPO3 in the end?
Yeah, we opted for we've checked the market in 2020 and looked left and right regarding other content management systems. We had 2 main reasons why we opted for TYPO3. The first reason was that a lot of organizations within the federal government were still using TYPO3 in different versions, but they were using TYPO3. And the other thing was we find quite a lot of extensions which we could use. So we didn't have the necessity to do our own developments, but we could use these extensions. These were the two main points.
So for any similar organization in another country who's looking to embark on a similar process of standardizing their digital solutions, what would you say would be the largest challenges they're likely to face in what I would imagine to be a very difficult task?
From my point of view, a very difficult task comes from the independency we have, especially in Germany, regarding the different ministries, as they have their own IT departments, they have their own budgets. So we have to convince them by reducing costs, that's one thing, and we have to convince them by reducing the time to market. Let's call it time to market. So to go live with a website, and when you have a website with a lot of extensions, which is easy to use, it's way easier to use than you have to do your own development. I guess these are the main points where we have to convince, and or depends on the view, where we have to struggle the most to convince those guys.
So I remember from my time working in the public sector, open source was often seen as almost like a taboo word. It was seen as something where support wasn't available, you were kind of on your own, and you're always better off opting for a proprietary solution or system with support. Would you say, in your experience at least, the attitude towards open source software, particularly in government, has changed over the last 5 or 10 years?
I'm not sure if it has changed within the last 5 or 10 years, but what we definitely notice is that it has changed within the last 2 years. We also had the same issues in Germany, like there's no support in the open source community and so on. But meanwhile, digital sovereignty is a key goal for the German government. So that's why we have a lot of open source initiatives. One of them is the GSB with TYPO3, but there are others. So to shorten it up, the attitude is in this change. The change is ongoing, and it's a pretty good thing, I think.
It's really cool. So, if you could talk me through, if I'm a federal agency and I'm looking to move away from whichever CMS I'm using to the government site builder, which uses TYPO3, could you talk me through the stages involved for me to switch over and start using the GSB for my project?
Yeah, your first contact is you have to get in touch with the Ministry of Interior, with the guys who are also present here, and you have to let's call it, you have to apply for. You just have to tell them that you want to use the government site builder, and then you're taken on the planning. So they will tell you when a rollout will happen, depending on can we do it this year or is it a bigger website, then we have to do it next year. But the first contact is always the Ministry of Interior, because the Ministry of Interior is in charge for the entire project.
Once I've been assigned my site, will I be given support or training? What kind of things can I expect?
Yeah, you can expect different things. You'll get the support throughout the entire process, so from the first contact until the go live. Yeah. We're supporting you with our team at ITZ Bund, and we have also contractors to offer trainings, and we have also contractors to offer content creation. If you don't want to do it on your own, of course you can do it on your own, but we have ministries who are used to talk to other agencies, and we also offer that wide. So in one phrase, we're guiding you throughout the entire process, from the beginning till the end.
Nice. Could you tell me about some of the larger projects you've got that are using GSB in terms of traffic and volume?
One of the largest projects we are having are some sites at the Ministry of the Interior. So we are changing different sites here from proprietary systems to the GSB. Of course, we changed our own website, the website of ITZ Bund, and we had a couple of go lives in the recent days for different ministries, for Ministry of Health and for the ministry who is responsible for migration, and they also launched their sites on the GSB 11. The last one was launched yesterday.
Oh wow, very, very busy then. And the Ministry of Health, so that must be, in terms of traffic, that must be very, very busy. website.
Yeah, it is a special website. It's only for a smaller organization, which belongs to the Ministry of Health. It's not their main website. It was an agency who is in charge of biological safety. That's what I learned yesterday during the Go Live. I didn't know that before, to be honest, but now I know it. So that was the website we launched last.
I briefly wanted to find out and I'm just fishing for compliments at this point, but I wanted to find out what the feedback was from your editors or members of different organizations who are using TYPO3 day to day. I'm assuming they're happy with the product and they're happy using it for their regular work.
For what we got back as feedback from those agencies, we changed the websites recently. They are pretty happy because the processes are getting way easier, which is not only for the content creators, but which is also, of course, for my colleagues who are responsible for the application, for the applications running, because for them it's pretty easier to develop or to deploy what has been developed. Just to let you know, in the older proprietary CMS, we had the issue to do all the steps manually. Meanwhile, we have a continuous integration and continuous development pipeline, so that's pretty nice to see that we can get faster here and of course cheaper.
So even the teams that are using the government site builder, they can also write their own extensions to run on top of their sites as well?
Yeah, they in general they can, but of course we would like to use extensions which are already given to the community, because we don't want to have that less own developments as possible. We would like to keep our websites closest to the standard as possible, and so this means you have the opportunity, but you should think twice or even triple if you really want to do this, because the closer you are to the standard, the easier it is to use for you.
Fair enough, thank you. Have you had any interest from any other countries about this project who want to try and mimic it or try and implement something similar where they are?
Yeah, I had a couple of interesting talks today also with guys from the digitization agencies from Rwanda or Papua New Guinea, which is not quite close to Germany, but it's nonetheless it's really interesting to hear their approaches and their struggles, because the struggles are similar on one hand. Standardization is our key goal. It seems to be the key goal all around the world, but the approaches are quite different. So this talk and this connection, this networking was really interesting for me today.
I've really enjoyed today as well. It's been really rewarding. If we can look ahead to say 12 months from now, what would you like to achieve in the next 12 months with the Government Site Builder project? Where would you like to be in a year's time?
In a year's time, for us, it would be really great to move forward with our rollouts. We have a lot of rollouts planned in the next 12 months, which means bringing the GSB 11 much more to the public sector world in Germany. So if we could meet again in 12 months, and I could tell you we're not only having 6 websites, currently we're having 6 websites live. So when I can say next year, let's say 30 or 35 or 40, of course, to be fair, it always depends on the financial conditions. Unfortunately, in Germany, our government broke down a couple of weeks ago. I guess everybody noticed that. So it's quite struggling to see what's the financial condition next year. But our main goal is to have much more websites rolled out.
Thank you. And from a personal perspective, I wanted to ask about, you've been, I guess, a part of this community or somewhat involved in the TYPO3 community for well over a year or maybe 2 years now. For you personally, have you enjoyed it? What have you taken from it so far?
What I have taken from us, what I have taken so far is that it's really important to connect to each other, because when you do that, you realize that the challenges we have, they are quite similar. So it always makes sense, in my opinion, not to develop a solution 5 times, but if somebody has developed a solution which other community members can use, so we should do that. Yeah. And that's quite a positive effect of the community, in my opinion.
That means a lot. It's brilliant. Nikolai Jaklitsch, thank you ever so much for your time. Thank you for speaking to me today. I really enjoyed spending time with you today as well. Have an enjoyable T3CON, and I will hold you to that, and I will see you next year. And we'll say 30 sites minimum.
All right. Thank you very much for your time. See you next year.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Day 2 kicked off with a spirited keynote from Open Strategy partners Jeffrey McGuire, but we all know him better as Jam. He roasted the Typo 3 community in a fun and loving way, hitting on all the memories and inside jokes that make the Typo 3 community so unique. He even concluded his talk with a dedicated Typo 3 song to the tune of Enter Sandman, which was a hit with the crowd. Cue the soundbite. Another highlight was the keynote from Janus Boye about the current state of open source and what needs to change in order to survive. We'll hear more from him in a bit. And last but not least, we heard from the Typo 3 family, both the GmbH and the association. They closed Day 2 off with their Ask Me Anything session, which included speaking from both perspectives about the current state of Typo 3 and what's on the horizon.
Accessibility was a hot topic at T3CON this year, and for all the right reasons. Stefan Barac and his colleague Claudio Zene gave an incredible talk on accessible experiences, and together they highlighted the fact that over 20% of the population in Switzerland have some form of disability and face significant and real challenges when using the web to purchase goods and services. In their talk, they told us why it's so important and potentially lucrative for organisations to take this demographic and their requirements more seriously. Up next is a quick-fire interview with Stefan, who gave us a short summary of his talk and his thoughts on T3CON in general.
Hi, I am Stefan Barac. I am from Zurich and I represent Incluton.com, our initiative to include more people with disabilities into the workforce of product and service teams. The Typo 3 conference has been really great the past few days because it was an exchange of like-minded people. People were really interested into accessibility and inclusion and asked many questions. And yeah, it was also interesting to see where they stand currently because the lawmakers have made accessibility an obligation. The Typo 3 conference the last 3 days was brilliant because many people came to our stand, asked about inclusion and accessibility, how the laws are inflicting on them, how everything works. And it was interesting for us to see where they are all standing because we see that a lot more people are getting curious about it, and that's great. I have never been in touch before with the Typo 3 community, but a friend of mine referenced me and he had been working with the Typo 3 before. And I have to say the first encounter was great. Everyone is brilliant, like-minded people, as I said before in my other statement. Sadly, attending talks was a little bit off the menu for us because we are only 2 people on our small stand, and we had to guard the stand because there was a big interest into accessibility. So, but generally, like all of the speakers who were talking, we talked in private with, and Mark Thiele, for example, a great guy. His topic is close to our heart, and we had a great talk with each other, and also some jurors like Hamid. And it's just great to exchange about those topics that people are interested about. So yes, on day 1, when it was German Day, we were on the stage. I don't know how to say it, but it has become quite a routine to go on stage. It is very nice to have a shift because a few years ago I asked following questions like, who has already formulated a budget for accessibility efforts? And out of 100 hands, 0 hands would go up. And these days when we ask, it's more like 5 to 6 hands go up. So it's a very big improvement already. The 3 words that come into mind when I think about T3CON is like intimate, brilliant, and striving towards a better goal.
Next, we'll speak with Janus Boye, who gave a keynote at T3CON about why open source needs to change in order to survive. He provides us with his unique insight and perspective from his 20 plus years within the industry.
So we're joined here with Janus Boye, who was one of the keynote speakers at T3CON 24 this year. Janus gave a talk about what open source CMS needs to do in order to change, or how rather. So Janus, if you could introduce yourself, give us a little bit of your background, and then let's do a recap of the talk, and Tom and I will have some follow-up questions.
All right, good. Just please tell me to stop. It's a long, big question, but let me start briefly with introducing myself. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for making it possible. I was also very happy to be back in Düsseldorf for the TYPO3 conference. I've been working in this field that's finally now settled on calling it CMS for over 25 years. I started my career at an agency in Munich, back then building corporate websites, but I think today you would look back and say those were glorified brochures. Then I went to Frankfurt and worked for a software company that had an internet publishing system, which is what you today would call CMS. And I felt back then it was being at the forefront of innovation, trying to solve this problem of large global complex organizations having chaos on their websites and putting a little bit of governance and control into it. I then moved back home here in Aarhus, Denmark, in 2003. And since 2004, I've been organizing this vendor neutral community that really stands on two legs. The one part is our groups, as we call them, really 15, 20 people typically in each, which meets around a given role or topic, something to do with digital, could be digital communication or project management or CMS, and then try to address this problem of organizational loneliness, that even though you're in a large, complex and global organization, you can still feel alone because who can you talk to about search engine optimization or open source CMS or whatever it is? And then the other big part of what we do is annual conferences. We've done the oldest running one here in Aarhus, an European conference focused on CMS and digital things. We had the pleasure back in 2005 of having Kasper Skorhøj here, the TYPO3 project founder, who gave a live demo of TYPO3 back then, sitting next to Interwoven, which was a big player back then, and Sitecore, which was also a big player back then and still is today, similar to TYPO3. So I've been following the TYPO3 community from a different viewpoint, but at least over quite a period of time. And so my keynote in Düsseldorf was really also from a friend, if you like, of the community, giving a message of change. And I started like a management consultant would do, even though I'm not one, to build the case for change. Why does CMS, open source CMS specifically, have to change at the moment? And I there said in particularly that it's necessary because customers expect it. So that's the one side of the answer. There's a lot of things happening at the moment with AI, search, and thankfully finally also progress due to legislation in terms of accessibility and sustainability. So we're finally making progress in some of these frontiers where we haven't really done so much when it comes to the digital experience side. And when you then look behind the scenes, it feels to me that there are some discussions, to be fair, that we're still having, even though we've done this for 20 years, even though TYPO3 has been around for 20 years in Drupal and WordPress and similar. And it feels a little bit like perhaps the pendulum has swung too much to the developer side for better parts of the last 20 years. So there is room for improvement when it comes to a better editorial interface for the marketeers, for those creating quality, authentic, human-created content. And then last but not least, there is change afoot in the open source CMS ecosystem with turmoil at the moment at WordPress and kind of like a reinvention at Drupal with them releasing Drupal CMS at the beginning of next year. So in summary, it's an interesting time to work with CMS. I think there's a lot of good opportunities at the moment, but it's also a time where if there's anything I can see clearly in the crystal ball for 2025, it's that change is afoot.
Well, I think that's a very thorough recap, and I appreciate you giving the listeners a little bit about your background for those who don't know you or haven't attended one of your CMS experts meetups, and also those who weren't at T3CON. So I'm looking at the conference, we had a digital or a graphic recording artist giving some of the key takeaways. And I don't know if you've seen yours from your talk.
I have. It was amazing.
It's amazing.
What a
And
treat.
It's really impressive and an interesting way to extract some of the big points. So as I'm looking at it and I'm seeing buzzwords like look beyond Europe, speak the language, follow the money, be part, strategy is easy, execution is the point. Could you, in terms like that, give us some of the key takeaways, just bullet points on, from your perspective, which I find to be very unique since you work with a lot of different CMSs and you're very familiar with the open source topic. What are the big changes that you think, just in a bullet point form, that you think really need to be implemented? I know one of ours from a previous conversation was talking about getting a younger generation involved in
Yes.
open source and keeping it alive, but how would you distill that down into
Yes.
a brief summary?
Yeah, why don't we start there? I think that just because something is 20 years old plus a few years perhaps doesn't necessarily make it uninteresting to the next generation. And I think also because it's 20 plus years old doesn't necessarily make it less trustworthy. Typo 3 has never, and again, I'm saying this as a friend, never had the reputation for being the fastest moving with innovative new features, or perhaps the system with the sexiest or easiest to use interface. But it's clear that it's come a long way in the last 20 years. So progress is there. It feels like customers are selecting Typo 3 for some of the same reasons, same good reasons that they selected Typo 3 10, 15 years ago, for the stability, plus also the ability to scale to handle multiple sites, multiple languages, etc. So Typo 3 already has quite a lot of what you need to be a healthy and vibrant community of the future. For me, it stands kind of on my answer to the community of the future is you got to continue to do events. I've seen from the distance how the Typo 3 community has been re-energized in the last couple of years, in terms of events, in terms of whether it's surfing, snowboarding, bar camps, whatever, local events, bigger events, smaller events, events that sometimes feel a little bit like a good family reunion, but also events where I could go if I was new to the community, attending for the first one and perhaps not ready to drink all of the Kool-Aid at once and hear all of the anecdotes of Kasper Skorhøj or the Typo 3-isms. That's normal in any project that's been around. So that's number one. Keep doing good events that can lower the bar so that anybody can feel like coming, and this is a good place, fun place to be. The second one, I think, comes back to the early days of the creation of all these systems that we're talking about. And my point there is keep looking at better solutions to the problems that customers are facing. Even though we've done this for a while as an industry, the constant arrival of new entrants on the CMS market is, to me at least, a testament that the marketplace is still have a hunger for better solutions, whether it's to solve technical problems or business problems or anything in between. Keep looking at that. How can we solve some of these problems better? And then third, but not least, and I'm seeing also signs of progress there, and that's probably the one that takes the longest to bring back home. That's this refresh or renewal of the community also when it comes to inclusivity, diversity. How do we get moved beyond that stereotypical Danish-German, we all look the same stereotype, and welcome new voices, whether they're coming from America or the UK or anywhere else in the world. I'm really happy to see the activities that Typo 3 is doing in the global south, and there's clearly a huge potential down there, also digitally, to solve problems in a better and more democratic way. So keep at those three things, and I'm pretty sure Typo 3 in the community will be in good shape for the future.
Janus, you talked about the need for existing open source projects to kind of evolve and adapt and change to the new world we live in today. From your perspective, are there any other projects out there that you're keeping an eye on that have done a good job of this in terms of changing and adapting?
That is a really good question, Tom. Thank you so much. To be honest, in this market over the years, I feel like there's more of an early mover disadvantage than a big advantage of coming first. And again, perhaps that also speaks to some of the strengths of Typo 3, that you don't need to be first. I have looked so far, and I think that's totally fine also for an open source community to see, okay, what's already there in the market that we could learn from. And if you start with WordPress, which is a little bit the elephant in the room in the bigger marketplace, they've done really well when it comes to going from zero to blog, and actually also down the road to big enterprise websites in a really, really short time, giving people a good experience, and their interfaces also come a long way. I've looked also at them in recent years with their work with the so-called Gutenberg editor, which was an attempt to make it easier for editors, communicators to create better storytelling online. Recently, this year, we've seen that, okay, looking behind the scenes, WordPress governance was clearly not the role model. On the other hand, if you look at Drupal, which is also one of the widely adopted systems, what I feel that they've done well is this use case of, or actually this ability to be a framework that's not entirely an empty box, but is enabling customers to do edge cases quite well, large media sites or whatever it is. And so I think there's an opportunity to look at them to say, how do we put even more power in the hand of agencies so that our partners, our agencies, can be even more successful when it comes to them building a business and in turn them having happy references. I hope that helps a little from inside CMS land. I think there's also a lot actually you can find from outside CMS land. I would say in recent 5 to 10 years, the whole arrival of the MarTech quadrant, or the marketing technology explosion, where we've seen that actually CMS might be the elder statesman in the bigger picture, but there are so many other vendors and never-ending seeming explosion in other vendors that are doing marketing technology really well, all kinds of marketing technology for campaigns, for everything you could think of online. And if you look at the big map of 15,000 plus vendors, CMS is there, but there's been a lot of movement around that space when it comes to the usage of AI, when it comes to the availability of data. And then last but not least, in this super collider, you have this composability thing, which as a Dane, can't help but connect to Lego bricks, enabling you as a customer to build things on top of each other and have these tools play nice with each other.
But so as you're taking a look at the landscape of open source and how the CMSs are adapting to staying relevant, we have AI in the conversation and all these other evolving technologies and moving pieces. I'm curious from your perspective, what do you think TYPO3 is doing well? So we're talking about how they've invested in-person events and the value of those. And one of the things throughout the conference that was mentioned multiple times was we kind of lost or forgot the value of in-person events with the pandemic. We had a bit of a surge, and now we're getting back into, realizing how important it is to connect in person and collaborate. We also have now talked about bringing the younger generation in. So, TYPO3 is doing surf camps, really recruiting younger or diverse talent for the marketing team to have different perspectives and voices. So I'm curious, being adjacent or a friend of the community, what you think they're doing right, and maybe what a few suggestions or where you think they could continue pushing to really, solidify themselves as part of the future in the conversation.
Sure. I think that it's a good point. One of the things I liked the most, that made me the happiest when I came to Düsseldorf, was seeing all the buzz and the attention around the government site builder. And it was a point actually also in the talk I had prepared when I came down, and then I added a photo of this packed booth that was more or less nonstop packed for all the time I was in Düsseldorf. And so the reason why I find this so good, and also the direction for the future, is this arrival of vertical solutions or industry-specific solutions. So the value I see with something like the government site builder is that it enables customers, in this case the German government, but potentially also others, to go from zero to value much quicker, not having to rebuild the same things. As so many customers have experienced in the last decade or 15 years, is once you go from the first CMS to the second, you're finding yourself rebuilding it all. New templates, functionality, rebuilding it all. And as you then implement the third CMS, whatever, a decade later, you're doing it one more time. And the idea of having something that's specific to an industry or a vertical, other vendors are doing it for higher education. I think there's huge potential here, but it's super meaningful on the customer side. And yes, in the short term, it might take a little bit from the agency's revenue who are being paid to rebuild again and again. But I do think that there is a build-up need there from customers and also from agencies who want to specialize, who actually don't want to build the same things over and over again, but who want to say, give us something that's 80% done, not 0% and just a powerful toolbox, but give us something that's 80% done, and then we can build on top of that for these few but specific requirements that the government have or the different branches of the government will have. So that's one thing I see in the future that hopefully will be much more of. I think it's slightly overdue, as some of the other things that made me happy also at the TYPO3 conference was this focus on accessibility, designing with the people that have disabilities or have these requirements, not just for them. And so I was really happy to see that. And with legislation coming, that's a huge opportunity. Again, it's change, and change is not always fun, particularly not when other people tell you you have to. But it represents a huge opportunity. And that was some of the excitement I felt throughout the conference from different agencies that, yes, they need to do work in a different way. I think, actually, to be honest, agencies are probably going to get hit harder and earlier by AI than on the tech side or on the CMS side. But these things like building websites better that are inclusive from the beginning, having the ability to take industry solutions so that they can win happy, referenceable customers faster represents a huge opportunity for the entire TYPO3 community around the world.
Well, your response marries this topic perfectly because Tom also did an interview in this episode about the government site builder. So that will be perfect to align with everything that we're talking about here. And lastly, before we let you go, we wanted to talk about, so you have a CMS kickoff coming up in the US, in Florida, in January. Can you tell us a little bit about it? I know that Daniel from TYPO3 GmbH will be attending. So just to give listeners a little bit of insight about what the CMS kickoff will entail.
Yes, really happy to have Daniel and Matthias with us next month already. This year, almost a year ago in January, when we did CMS Kickoff 24, we had Benny there for the first time. Benny being super well-known, friendly guy in the TYPO3 community, who, if I remember correctly, also won an award, Personality of the Year. And the idea with the kickoff is really this need or this suggestion we heard from several of our members, both in Europe and North America, is that this industry is missing a vendor-neutral conference where we can get together from across the ecosystem of analysts, agencies, vendors, practitioners on the customer side, and not just hear presentations from each other, but work together to make progress and see how do we solve these thorny content management issues and move forward instead of everybody developing essentially often the same solutions in their own echo chamber, naming it with Drupalisms in the Drupal world and TYPO3isms in the TYPO3 world. So that's the idea of a kickoff. It's 2 days of working together. Really interesting to see also how these people who may be really feeded in the Sakura ecosystem, or like Benny, really well known, everybody wants to talk to him in the TYPO3 community, they come over there and they don't know anybody else. But then after just a few hours, if we've done our preparation done well, then shoulders are down, sleeves are up, and we can really work on these things. And I'm really happy to see a lot of good deliverables coming out of the past kickoffs, where as an industry, we take the first baby steps towards some of the missing standards. There was a Canadian vendor which changed some of the naming to align with industry standards based on some of these conversations. And these might all individually be small steps, but I do think that they make a big difference for the customer side, who was ultimately paying for all of it. And so I think that's really rewarding, and really happy to have TYPO3 with us.
Janus, thank you ever so much for speaking with us today. We're really grateful. Before we do say goodbye, I was wondering if I could ask a very small favor. As Kendall mentioned, Daniel, our boss, will be attending the event with you in January next year. And I'm a little bit worried about Daniel because he's very, very fair-skinned. And I know you guys are going down to South Florida, I believe, where it's going to be rather warm and rather sunny as well. So I was just wondering, when you're out there and when you're connecting with the community and really taking part in what looks to be quite an important event, can you just make sure for me that he puts some sunscreen on as well and he stays covered up in the sun, because we don't want him burning up in January. So if you could just keep an eye on him, and Matthias as well. Just make sure they're covered up.
We'll keep them air-conned inside. That's right. We'll do our best.
Yeah, absolutely. They're very sensitive to heat. So yeah, if you could take good care of them for us, we'd be most grateful.
We'll do. It's a common problem to us Vikings that go into the sun and stay out for too long. So thanks for reminding me, Tom. Much appreciated.
No, you're very welcome, and thank you in advance. So yeah.
Also sensitive to air conditioning.
Oh yeah, then there's that.
Air conditioning, so we'll have to be very careful. And since with the American in the room, I'll give Daniel some tips for his inaugural trip to the United States.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Janus, for joining us, and for, not only joining us here on the podcast, but also at T3CON, and for all that you do in the community and involving us. I had such a nice time with you at the CMS Experts meetup in Berlin, and really was impressed with the kind of conversation and dialogue that you facilitate and bringing people together. So thank you for being a part of it, and for, as you said, being a friend to the TYPO3 community.
Thank you for having me. Much appreciated.
The awards gala was a very special evening. You could tell all the attention and love that went into the planning for this event, from the menus to the music and the details in the award creation. The hosts were fantastic and really captured the essence of the TYPO3 community and spent time with award winners to learn more about their projects and client relationships. Throughout the night, there were 13 awards given for the traditional categories, and there were 2 additional categories, which included accessibility and performance. Then there was the big award, the TYPO3 Website of the Year. This award was given to Lime Soda for their work on the Vienna City Card website. A big congratulations to Lime Soda. Then there was a category added for the Best TYPO3 Camp of the Year, which was given to TYPO3 Camp Vienna. Needless to say, Austria was a hot topic at this year's awards. During the evening, we spent a few emotional minutes as TYPO3 GmbH CEO Daniel Fowl gave a speech to thank and express his, along with the community's, appreciation for TYPO3 core team lead Benny Mack. Benny was awarded the TYPO3 Personality of the Year, which was unanimously supported given the long-standing ovation and shouts from the crowd. It was a very special moment to be present for. After the awards, we all gathered upstairs for midnight snacks, drinks, and dancing. There was even a large surprise, yes, a huge TYPO3 logo hanging from the ceiling, and as the night went on, it began orchestrating a very entertaining laser show. Truly the icing on the cake. A big thank you to all who attended, submitted their projects, and of course, the ones behind planning the event.
Okay, so that's it for December's episode, and that's it for this year on the Inside TYPO3 podcast. Kendall, what has been your favorite episode this year?
Oh, okay, that's a good question. I think I would have to say probably the developer days, mostly because we were together in person and had our own little room, so it felt very official. Also, the one that we did in the office in Dusseldorf was nice too. But I would have to say the developer days because it was more fun.
Yeah, it was a good one.
What was yours?
I think mine was the Sebastian Bergman interview. I got a bit excited meeting him for the first time. And he was a really good guest. He was a very good speaker as well. So I think that episode is my favorite. I think this episode might be up there as well, just because of the quality of people we've had on today. We've had some really good talks of people. So yeah, between this episode, I think, and maybe the Sebastian Bergman interview from, I think it was June or July. So yeah, it's a tough one. But other than that, I think it's just time for us to say goodbye and thank everyone for listening again to us this month. We will be back next year, I hope, with more episodes and more content to bring you. And as always, if you have any comments or suggestions, you can always email us at podcast@typo3.com. But from me, have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And from Kendall,
have a good holiday break, and we'll see you as we ramp up for another exciting year in Typo 3 next month.
Cool. I'll see you then.
See ya.
There's lots of bread as well, which I noticed. There's loads of bread everywhere, so that's very German. So welcoming, very well organised and bready.
I actually didn't find it hilarious.